Coming up on Network Africa. West Africa bloc ECOWAS lifts economic and financial sanctions on Mali and Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso's former president, Kabore, gets total freedom as the junta allows his return to his family. The World Health Organization says the latest Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo is officially over. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers. Let's begin with stories and happenings that made headlines over the weekend.
Protesters broke into Libya's parliament in Tobruk on Friday evening, setting fire in front of the building to express their anger towards Libya's warring political parties. Fury at Libya's feuding leaders boiled over as protesters stormed the parliament building in the eastern city, staging the biggest demonstration for years in the capital, Tripoli, in the west. The Tobruk protesters accused Parliament of treason and stealing public money some 8 years after its election. In videos posted online and confirmed by city residents, the demonstrators shouted and cheered as flames licked up the side of the building. With political factions squabbling over control of government after failing to hold a scheduled election last year, Libya has been thrust back towards territorial division and civil war as state services gradually collapse. Sudanese protesters continued an open-ended campaign of sittings they started in Khartoum after 9 people were reportedly killed on Thursday, June the 30th, in the largest anti-military rallies for months. Protest groups say the campaign is part of a series of peaceful activities taken in response to the deaths. Those gathered held up Sudanese flags, painted murals, and served water and tea during the sit-in.
There wouldn't be any level of security if justice is not served for the martyrs, including those who died in June the 30th. Because any person can kill and still stay in power. Currently, the biggest achievement of a sit-in is that it escalated the protest movement and people started to see each other face to face and coordinate more.
Medics aligned with the protesters say the 9 people were mostly killed by gunfire from security forces in Khartoum and the adjoining cities of Omdurman and Bahri. Thursday's rallies came after more than 8 months of demonstrations against military leaders who staged a coup last October, ending a power-sharing arrangement with civilians agreed following the 2019 overthrow of Omar al-Bashir. Pope Francis delivered a video message to the people of the Democratic Republic of Congo and South Sudan on Saturday, July the 2nd, the day he was due to start his visit, which was cancelled because of walking problems.
The Lord knows how greatly disappointed I am to have had to postpone this long-awaited and much-desired visit, but we remain confident and hopeful that we shall be able to meet as soon as possible. As I await the opportunity to see your faces, to feel at home in your lively Christian communities, to embrace all of you with my presence, and to bless your land, my prayers and my affection for you and your peoples become all the more intense.
The July 2nd to the 7th trip to the DRC and South Sudan had been postponed indefinitely because of the 85-year-old pontiff's knee ailment, which has forced him to use a wheelchair for more than a month.
West African leaders have announced the lifting of sanctions against the military regime in Mali and Burkina Faso. A meeting of the heads of state and governments of the Economic Community of West African States in the Ghanaian capital, Accra, accepted a proposal by the Malian military to hold elections and return to civilian rule by March 2024. The bloc had imposed crippling economic sanctions after army officials staged 2 coups in less than a year in August 2020 and May 2021.
West African leaders have lifted economic and financial sanctions imposed after coups in Mali and Burkina Faso. The Economic Community of West African States had imposed stiff sanctions on Mali in January after its junta said democratic elections will not take place the following month as planned. Mali defaulted on over $300 million of debt due to the sanctions, which cut it off from the region's financial markets and central bank. ECOWAS Commission President Jean-Claude Cassibrou said heads of state had agreed to relax the bloc's position after Mali's military rulers proposed a 24-month transition back to democracy and published a new electoral law.
Upon the recommendation made by the mediator and after discussion, the head of state took the following decision. The first decided to lift all the economic and financial sanctions that were taken on January 9, 2022. That means essentially the closure of the border and the freeze of the financial asset. So those sanctions are lifted.
However, Cassibrou said individual sanctions and Mali's suspension from ECOWAS would remain until there was a return to constitutional rule.
Authority of Burkina Faso have made a new proposal, which is now to have the transition in Burkina last for 24 months, starting July 1st. So this is a progress that has been made. And as I said, with the freedom of President Kabore, the head of state now decided to took the following decision. First is to remove the economic and financial sanctions that were imposed to Burkina Faso on 25th March 2022.
However, the bloc rejected a 3-year transition proposed by coup leaders who seized power in Guinea, a third country which has witnessed a military takeover in September. The junta was told to propose a new timeline by the end of July or face economic sanctions.
By the end of July, a new timetable for the transition, more acceptable. Then beyond that, sanction will be imposed, economic and financial sanction will be imposed, as well as even the individual sanctions that are already in Guinea could be expanded. For the moment, they have decided to maintain the sanction in terms of the individual sanctions that were taken and to maintain the suspension of Guinea from all ECOWAS institutions.
In the meantime, as Mali is free from ECOWAS sanctions, the borders will be reopened and regional diplomats will return to Bamako. The sanctions have crippled Mali's economy, raising humanitarian concerns amid widespread suffering.
Let's expand this discussion. Joining us on the program is African Affairs analyst Okwe Opala. Thank you so much for joining us today on Network Africa.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So what are, yes, certainly. So what are your thoughts on ECOWAS lifting sanctions on Mali and Burkina Faso? Can these countries heave a sigh of relief, do you think, with this latest development?
Well, the whole essence of imposing sanctions to deter future coups, those who may want to topple democratic governments, to desist from doing so, not to encourage them to desist from toppling democratic governments. Another one is to force those who have already toppled government, like it is in Burkina Faso, in Mali and Guinea, to quickly return to the path of democracy. And the sanctions, because has put external pressure, which coupled with internal agitation has made the coupists, the junta in these countries, especially in Mali, to buckle under the pressure, to cooperate with the Jonathan-led committee to broker a timetable, and a timetable which is now acceptable to ECOWAS. So for this, I think it has achieved its purpose, not exactly what we wanted, because within this period, the borders of all the ECOWAS members closed their borders with these countries. They were not able to export, they were not able to import through this border. There were also the financial sanctions and the assets freeze. So all the assets they have with ECOWAS members were frozen. So these things put a lot of pressure to the junta and forced them to cooperate with the Jonathan, especially in the case of Mali, the Jonathan-led delegation of ECOWAS, and now they have proposed 24 months transition, which the ECOWAS leaders have now accepted. So to some extent, they will feel some relief, because now at least the trade can continue, the assets are unfrozen, although some sanctions remain until they fully return to the democratic path.
So the sanctions, when they were there, were quite crippling to the economies of these nations that were already battling security challenges. How do you think they can bounce back to civil democracy?
Of course, like in the case of Mali, for over 10 years now, they've been suffering from jihadist insurgency to military coups. So the economy is already crippled. And when you add that to the sanction they are not able to access financial services and loans from regional banks, including the African Development Bank. You see, because of that, they defaulted on debts, and which put them under serious economic situation. But now, with the lifting of these sanctions, of course, it will be easier for them. Their trade is likely going to go up. Like they are likely going to have access services from the regional financial institutions, and so I believe that it will be a huge relief, especially for a country like Mali that have been under severe economic stress.
How do you think the countries will react to the 2-year transition time agreed to by ECOWAS?
You see, I believe that in as much as there's an agreement, we cannot rely on the goodwill or good intentions of the military junta to accomplish the purpose of the objective of ECOWAS and the objective of the citizens of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Burkina Faso in particular. The pressure must continue, both from the agitations internally must continue, and the ECOWAS must continue their pressure, especially with respect to violating individual sanctions which they've maintained. They will make sure that they are enforced. The individual sanctions of members of the junta, and also they've been suspended from ECOWAS, the head of state, so that except if they feel that the burden has been relieved enough, they may renege. They may renege even in their promise to do it in 24 hours. However, the timetable should be followed closely. In the case of Mali, they said by March next year, there should be a referendum on the new constitution. By later in the year, 2023, there will also be, later in 2023, there will be legislative election. So, the pressure should be on to make sure that they abide by this timetable, and none of this, and that there is plan towards implementing this timetable, not just to wait until March and know whether they did it, but ECOWAS should follow up and make sure that each of these items in the program are being met as at when due. And I think that with democracy, I mean, the economy will bounce back, at least to some extent, better than it is now. And the government will get the cooperation of people, and both within and outside the countries. And that is likely going to be better for the citizens of Mali, for the citizens of Burkina Faso, and eventually, when Guinea complies, even for Guinea too.
Right, African Affairs Analyst Okwe Okwala, thank you so much for your time on Network Africa.
You're welcome.
Still ahead on the program. After 120 years, Nigeria's Benin bronzes are to be repatriated from Germany. Details in a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the program. Burkina Faso's former president, Roch Kabore, has been granted total freedom by the military generals who overthrew him in a coup in January. According to local media, the move is part of reconciliation efforts. Mr. Kabore was allowed to return to his family home in the capital, Ouagadougou, in April after being placed under house arrest since the coup. His party, the People's Movement for Progress, said the former leader has since neither been free to move, free to receive certain people, nor to communicate. The military junta on Sunday reaffirmed the total release of the former head of state as part of dynamics of strengthening social cohesion and national reconciliation. Junta leader Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Damiba met Mr. Kabore last month to discuss security, the transition to civilian rule, and other matters of national interest. Elsewhere, the man who oversaw the drawing up of Tunisia's proposed new constitution is faulting the final document published by the president, terming it dangerous. Sadok Belaid, a former constitutional law professor, is quoted by local media saying that some chapters could pave the way for a dictatorial regime. He had been entrusted by President Kais Saied with reshaping Tunisia's constitution, but said that what is being put to a referendum on July 25th does not resemble the first draft proposed by his committee. In a letter published on the matter, he said the published draft involved risks of serious pitfalls, in particular the erasure and distortion of Tunisian identity. He also criticized the president's restructuring of the judiciary, saying the new system in which the president would appoint judges to a supreme judicial body would reduce its independence. The World Health Organization says the latest Ebola outbreak has been contained within 3 months thanks to a swift and robust response in the Democratic Republic of Congo. 4 people have died since this outbreak, the country's 14th since 1976, which was declared in April in the western city of Mbandaka. 3 of those who died were considered confirmed cases and 1 was considered a probable case. WHO Director for Africa, Dr. Mashidiso Moeti, has lauded the response, saying this shows that by bolstering preparedness, disease surveillance, and swift detection, we can stay a step ahead. The global health body says it will continue to monitor the situation in case of any flare-ups, but in a statement, it praised the Congolese authorities. The UN organization worked together with the government to roll out vaccinations, testing, contact tracing, infection prevention and control, as well as community engagement. Egyptian officials say that 2 women have now been killed in shark attacks while swimming in the Red Sea. The Environment Ministry says the attacks occurred with 600 meters of each other's. The authorities had earlier announced that an Austrian woman in her 60s had died of her injuries on Friday. A Romanian woman in her 40s is now also said to have been killed. The incidents happened in the Hurghada region, which is a major tourist resort. As a result of this incident, several beaches have been closed in the area. A letter signed by 34 British MPs and Lords has been delivered to the Egyptian embassy, expressing their opposition to the imprisonment of a British national in Egypt. The group hopes that ABDEL Fattah's release will be secured soon and that he will be allowed to travel to the United Kingdom. The Egyptian Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry is expected to visit London for talks with UK Foreign Secretary Liz Truss. This comes after Ms. Truss confirmed to Parliament last month that she is working very hard to secure his release and would be bringing it up with Mr. Shoukry at an upcoming visit to London. Monday will be Mr. Allah's 94th day of hunger strike. It will also be his sister's 23rd day of hunger strike. A memorandum of understanding on the transfer of ownership of the Benin bronzes from Germany to Nigeria has been signed by Germany's Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock, Minister of State for Culture Claudia Roth, and their Nigerian counterparts Lai Mohammed and, of course, Zubairu Dada. 120 years later, the Benin bronze will be back to Nigeria, sitting at its rightful place where it belongs.
The historic Benin bronze, the head of a king, will soon be finally returning home to Nigeria, more than 120 years after it was stolen by colonial forces. The sculpture, which once adorned an altar, was one of more than 5,000 objects looted from the royal palace by the British Army after the invasion of the Kingdom of Benin in 1897. A German businessman bought the bronze in Lagos and eventually took it to Europe.
This is a story of European colonialism. We should not forget that Germany played an active role in this chapter of history. Today, more than 120 years later, we state clearly, the head of a king belongs to the people of Nigeria.
Currently, more than 1,000 pieces of what are considered some of Africa's greatest treasures are residing in German museums. All will be returned to Nigeria by the German government, and German museums in what Nigeria's Foreign Minister Zubairu Dada said showed tremendous courage. The first two bronzes, one depicting the head of a king, the other showing a king and his 4 attendants taken back personally by Dada and Culture Minister Lai Mohammed, who were present at the ceremony.
I am delighted to be part of this auspicious event, which in my opinion will go down as one of the most important days in the celebration of African cultural heritage, as epitomized by this historic joint declaration that our two countries are about to sign.
As a federal government and as a country, we acknowledge the horrific outrages committed under colonial rule. We acknowledge the murders and plundering. We acknowledge the racism and slavery. We acknowledge the injustice and trauma that have left scars that are still visible today. Ladies and gentlemen, we can change our blindness towards the past. So this day should not only open our eyes, it should also shine a light to illuminate our shared future.
Germany's decision to carry out one of the largest ever repatriations of historic artifacts reflects a dawning awareness in Europe of the continuing political relevance of anger and the lasting legacy of colonial looting and violence.
That's a wonderful development that you see there. Well, that's it on Network Africa. Thank you for watching. I'm Jock Carroll.